Sweet. Want to kick this off?
Sure. Hey, I'm Mike. I'm the one that brought everybody together based on the fact that I've always thought about starting a podcast and life and never have started a podcast. And at the town hall, there was talk of your mission to help people create things, start things, do things. And podcasting was the one that I can't remember if that was your initial intention or if it just resonated with me because of those thoughts in my head. So I figured that we should talk about it. I have no subject matter expertise in podcasting. I was an audio production major way back when and did that for a long time, but that was a while ago. So yeah, I'm going to literally pass to Alex and let you run with it.
Cool. We can start doing a quick round of introductions. I don't think everybody knows everybody. So Mike, you already went.
I'm Jag. Want to learn more about podcasting stuff.
Is there anyone who is interested in this from, actually, let me take a big step back. Anybody already have a podcast? Cool.
Does in my mind count?
No. Conversations in
Nice
your
attempt,
head doesn't count. Good question though. Okay, cool. People already have podcasts. Awesome. I think we can approach this conversation a lot of different ways. And like Mike and I were chatting a little bit, I think it makes sense to start from the beginning, which is in like how to actually get started with a podcast. And then there's opportunity to build on it. Jimmy's got way more production experience than I do, especially on the audio engineering side of things. But then there's also a whole realm of what podcasts are out there that work really well and what about them works really well, how they get promoted, launching podcasts, audience engagement. So like we can end up with a whole series of these. Actually, I have an idea. Who you are and one of your favorite podcasts. And we assume that everybody wants to make a podcast already listens to them. So favorite podcast other than your own. How's that sound? Cool? Everybody can do that. All right, so Mike, you want to start there and then we'll work our way around?
Mike Tannenbaum. Have too many that I don't listen to, but my favorite is probably Unmistakable Creative, which is an interview series, 500 something episodes of one guy that just interviews pretty much everybody at Indy Hall in terms of just creativity and authors and writers and ambitious people and What's it called? Unmistakable Creative.
I'm gonna write down all of the podcasts everyone's saying because we should have a list.
And because of the way you described it, I'm gonna add a favorite podcast and what you really like about it or why it's one of your favorites. Yeah. Because I think that's helpful. Like you take a pulse of what kind of stuff people are into.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm Jag Talon, and I think my favorite podcast right now is Surprisingly Awesome. They talk about boring things like cardboard or pigeons, and they're surprisingly pretty interesting. So I like that podcast right now.
I'm Bernardo. Not too many. Probably the Action Army is one of the top. It's just actionable and the guy's no bullshit and he says what he means. It's freelancer. It's also good learning experience.
Cool.
I'm Sam, and my favorite podcast is probably Hello from the Magic Tavern, which is an improv podcast where they're pretending that they are in a magical world that they create over the course of these podcasts. And I think they're close to 100 episodes, and they remember everything from the first episode. Like they've created this world, and it's so complex that even their guests remember what it is. It's also absurd as heck, and I can talk about it forever. So talk to you about it after.
What is it called?
Hello from the Magic Tavern. If you give it a try, give it at least until the third episode, because that's the one where I really fell in love.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Zornick. I'm an iOS developer and teacher. And my favorite podcast is probably Core Intuition, which is it's two guys in the Apple developer ecosystem. And it's very casual, just like weekly, just chat about current things going on in the ecosystem as well as their personal companies, about like independent developers. And it's a very relaxing show, and I like listening to it in the car.
Okay.
I'm Kathy, and I listen to, there's one guy again named Kevin Rogers on copywriting, and I listen to it because it's useful and you know what?
No, I was just
It's useful and it's very specific to the area, and they interview different people. And then there's a guy named Ian Brody out of England who has an online marketing one. And it's, one thing is delightful Scottish accent. I listen to all day. And he also prints out the content. You have a choice of which one to get. And it's so
Okay, I'm Jimmy Goodman, and I've been an audio engineer for 20 years or so. And so I got into podcasting because I recorded an audio book here for Lanternfish Press. And then I started doing podcasting. I'm no podcast expert as far as great podcasts to listen to, because I don't really listen to many. But I do seem to really like the Alec Baldwin, Here's the Thing, I think it's called. And I just think it's perfectly produced. I mean, it just sounds amazing, and I like his guests. It's funny.
Adam.
I'm Adam. Thanks, everybody. Go ahead. My favorite podcast is a show called My Brother and Me, and is an advice podcast with three brothers who are awful at giving advice. And it is funny, and it is my happiness every week. It is like the undeniable bliss every week, regardless of what's taking place. It's very charming.
Is it like car talk for relationships?
It's primarily them attempting to help people who ask questions using Yahoo Answers. If that gives you any. Yeah. So people ask some funny questions on Yahoo Answers. These three brothers try as hard as they can to offer their insight, and it's a great show.
Hi, I'm Ernesto. I'm a software developer. And I guess I have a lot of favorite podcasts, but if I had to pick one, I would pick 99% Invisible. I like it because it's about everyday things and design of everyday things and how they came to be, and it's very well produced, and I really like it. And they're short and sweet, so I recommend it.
Alex, I'm gonna go a little unconventional and say that one of my favorites is, I'll say it's the podcast that I love to hate the most, is the Joe Rogan Experience. And the Joe Rogan Experience is the podcast that made me realize that I think I could make a podcast. Joe Rogan was the host of Fear Factor, and he's like a big name in MMA fighting and things like that. And in a lot of ways, a very like frustrating human being, but he's an incredible interviewer. And his guests, there's three kinds of guests. He has MMA fighters, which I don't enjoy those. I don't really follow MMA. He has other comedians on, which it becomes a lot of like inside baseball with featuring comedians, which I don't find very interesting. But when he has other just like interesting world characters, there's something about his interviewing style that takes these wandering conversations that often are like 2.5 and 3 hours long into places that I never would have imagined. I don't listen to every episode, but every episode I do listen to, I find endlessly fascinating.
Great. I'm Vanessa. I'm an instructional designer. I'm interested in podcasts. A lot of people are learning things through podcasts. My favorite podcast is not like an educational podcast. It's an art podcast, sound art. It's Love and Radio. And it has this like spiral structure of storytelling that every episode starts over here, and then it pulls you into something that you're really uncomfortable with, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm comfortable here, and then it's like, whoa, all right, and you're kind of, you don't even know who you are at the end of it. My friend Brendan uses it.
So
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of really interesting things about launching a podcast, and I'll speak from my own experience and having launched one for the folks who have podcasts. I'd love to hear from you as well about. I want to speak a little bit about like why I launched it, and then a couple things I learned and what I got out of it, and then again the folks who are producing something, I'd love to sort of get the similar kind of sharing from you. I have been writing for, and actually I have two. I have one for an audience of folks that are starting co-working spaces, running co-working spaces, interested in sort of collaborative communities and community building and those sorts of themes. I also have another show called Stacking the Bricks that is more focused on sort of entrepreneurship, bootstrapping, and problem solving as a small business person, rather being a creative person trying to start a small business. The thing that both of those things had in common is there was already an audience that I was speaking to, mostly through writing. So I had a fair bit of practice of knowing who was out there that was interested in like a collection of topics, and I already had some rapport with. The thing that was different about podcasting versus writing, and I'll speak specifically about the co-working one in particular, because it is a super, super tiny niche audience. Like compared to a lot of mainstream podcasts, the number of people that actually care about the stuff we talk about or would know to look for it is very, very small. And that's true in the writing side of things as well. The audience dialogue is unlike anything else I've ever had. And I haven't totally put my finger on it. I have a couple of hunches. But I've been writing about the things that I've learned starting and running Indy Hall for a long time. And I would get the occasional email and comments and things like that. But it was the podcast that was what kicked off me hearing from people that they were spending a lot of time learning from us. So I had spent probably way more hours than we have recorded writing things that I thought were useful. And I hear from people saying, like, thanks for writing your blog, it's awesome. When I started the podcast, I hear people saying, I just found your podcast. I just listened to all of it. Like all the episodes you've ever done. I'm like, that's like several, if you were listening consecutively, like that's a lot of time for you to be spending with me. And I realized that something very intimate about voice and that amount of time and attention that you get to spend with people, that a lot of other communication tools that we have to create something once and have people connect with it over and over and over, it has all of those elements of, writing and things like that. And it's, I would say, the same way people would, I think a lot of people would say like video is probably the most deepest connection you can build because you can sort of make eye contact with a person. The gap between producing video and producing audio is huge in terms of cost, equipment, time, skills, et cetera. It's environment, et cetera, et cetera. So I think audio is a sweet spot between being able to build a very deep connection with people about something that you care about, they care about, do it episodically, which when you do things episodically, that was the other thing, was writing was inconsistent. Podcasting for me has also been inconsistent, but we're working on that. We can talk a little bit more about that. But the fact that you can create a sequence of something that when people find one thing, they're going to go and gobble up the rest of them once they find one. I've never found another medium that's quite like that. So for me, it's been, and that translated over to Stacking the Bricks as well, the deepest engagement I've ever had into group people. It's been the easiest way for me to elicit a conversation, to bring people into a conversation. And the last thing that has been really powerful for me is, as someone who had previously focused on writing, and I still write quite a bit, it's easier for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, not everybody, to sit down and talk through something, either by yourself or with other people, than it is to sit down and write a post about a thing. There's something about dialogue that makes it easier to get a concept across, or to even work through a half-baked idea. It's hard to write down a half-baked idea. It's easier to record a conversation working through a half-baked idea and maybe bake it a little bit more. So those are a lot of strengths of the medium, and for, again, both of those, from, I guess, my audience, people that are trying to start doing something, starting running a co-working space or getting better at it, starting running a business or getting better at it, the medium lends itself to that. That's different from entertainment and like general topic interest, kind of pop culture kind of stuff. that's some of the takeaways for me. For other folks that are already doing things, I'm curious what you like. Why did you start one? What have you learned along the way?
I started my podcast, the one that I'm running right now with my buddy Octavius, because we talk a lot on the phone, or we used to, over the course of our friendship, and we decided that it was probably something beneficial that could be broadcast and shared with the community larger than just the two of us. So the conversations that we were having on the phone, we were now having in the and sharing with folks, and we found that a lot of people liked the same topics that we were discussing, and the way that we discussed it resonated with folks who don't have outlets for that manner of discussion. The show that we do is trying to find meaning and parallels in pop culture to the things that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So, like, when Trump got elected, we talked for a really long time about how that's going to change comic books for us, and how weird it feels to go to escapism when we really need to face stuff right now. And those conversations are ones that I will have with my friends, but it feels more important when we share it with a larger group. What I didn't expect as we were doing it is that the people that we were sharing the show with, the audience, would grow and interact back with us and end up provoking us to have conversations we didn't realize we had. So my podcast started as just a way to stay in touch with my buddy, and it's turned into a way that I found a way to, like, a weekly exercise to be a better human, and that's been interesting because I'm doing it. Didn't know that was going to happen. But that's been a fun thing, and sometimes not fun. But I do think it's important, and the reality is, at the end of the day, the podcast that I run now, that we've been doing for just going on a year, and it is the most consistent creative endeavor I have ever been a part of, and I'm very proud of that. But it is making a product, or making something, creating something out of a hobby that was otherwise just me spending money on comic books and geek stuff. But now I've made something, so I feel like I've elevated my interest in it, in that hobby, and I've decided not to be passive of just take, but give.
Cool.
So my podcast started because it's a little backstory. I'm a graphic designer and lived in New York for a while, and I hated it, and I had the dream job, and I hated it. So I made a commitment to be happy, and I moved back to Philly, and I started my business, and my business called This Makes Me Happy. And just talking to people, my story, just when they look at my logo, when they see, even when I'm paying with my debit card and it says This Makes Me Happy, people just ask me about it and what I do and how did I come up with the name. So as an extension of that, I decided that I wanted to do something with it and not just keep that to myself. So that's kind of how it started, my podcast, which is also called This Makes Me Happy. And basically, I just ask people what makes them happy, and we talk about it for half an hour or whatever. So it started as a way to share the conversations that I'm already having just by 4 years ago decided to become happier, and anything like this is that. Originally, my plan was to grow an audience and find a way to create products. And the more I do it, the more it's just a passion project, because what I get out of it is, how awesome it is that you can have a full day working. I also teach, so sometimes I'm teaching all day, and then I have client work, and then I get home and I have a recording, and I'm like, crap, I have to be here until 9 p.m. recording. And as I'm through it, that changes completely. Like, I just have the most wonderful, I had a recording before coming here, and like my mood for the rest of the day is going to be amazing. I'm just happy to know that I met someone from Bulgaria who is happy, helping others and writing and creating new stuff, and who's a Capricorn and shares so many things with me, So that's mainly what I'm getting, the notion, like the idea that I'm meeting all those wonderful people I wouldn't know otherwise. My audience hasn't grown significantly since it started, but the feedback I'm getting, people, like the stories I hear, people allowing themselves to be happy, and people just allowing themselves to enjoy what they're doing. Some people that I've recorded with, they email me the next morning, like, by the way, yesterday was amazing because I had this, catharsis in this process first thing in the morning, and then the rest of my day was wonderful. So it's definitely, I've made some connections, but it's mostly about the passion and the growth, and I no longer want to make it a product. There are other projects I have in mind for 2017 that I wouldn't have gotten to or wouldn't have thought of had I not started this project. But this project is just a passion project, and I just love doing it. And I want to do more content. I want to do more with it. I definitely want to grow an audience, but it's more passion than anything else.
Can I ask questions of the people who make the podcast? How much time, effort, energy, dollars go into one episode?
A lot.
Like, can you quantify that though?
Well, money, I have a $20 subscription for Libsyn. I use a host. It's a host. You can, so I don't know, you can speak to this, but
It's like 20 bucks a year. 20 bucks a month.
no, the one I have is the 20 a month.
20 a month. Okay. That's for like more analytics and stuff like that.
More capacity, more analytics. The biggest misconception is people think you post to iTunes. iTunes doesn't hold anything. You need a host, or you need to host it yourself. I decided to host with someone else just so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So that's $20 a month, and then I pay $30 a month for my iStock membership, or like Adobe Stock membership, so that's for my social media. I spend at least an hour and a half recording for each episode, plus the solicitation. That's another at least half an hour to an hour. I don't do that editing myself, but my boyfriend does it, so it's free for me. But it would be $50 to $100 an hour an episode. I have to pay for it, plus all the social media. So I put at least just me at least 5 hours per episode. But I have people helping me, and I pay my assistant to do the show notes. So probably, I'd say if I have to pay for the whole thing, $100 per episode, plus at least 5 to 10 hours per episode.
And how long are the episodes?
Between half an hour and a half, depending on the guest.
Are you doing a post-production on the audio?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's the part I'm getting for free from my boyfriend who's doing it for me.
Got it.
But he puts in at least an hour and a half for each one of them.
I'm going to jump in here because I'm coming at it from a different sort of thing, it seems, than everybody else, which is I've had blogs and stuff in the past, especially like, well, I've got one, The Rock and Roll Vegetarian, so I guess that's self-explanatory. And I've thought about doing my own podcast, but it seems like a lot of work and a lot of effort. But I have the skill of being an audio engineer for 20 years, and I also have a top-of-the-line recording studio in my apartment. And so I'm not really doing it as a passion project as much as, well, I love recording. I love kind of producing things and working with people, but it's also, I just realized I have a very good skill that is fairly marketable. It seems like a lot of people want to do podcasts because I have a website for podcasts, and I'm getting like two calls a week, maybe, people that want to do podcasts, but they don't all come through because I charge. And so that's kind of, I charge $100 an episode to do a half an hour, 45-minute podcast.
What does that include?
That includes, basically, it's 2 hours. So the client shows up. I've already spent some time.
Recording on site in your studio.
Excuse me?
That includes recording on site in your studio?
Yeah, see, I don't upload it. I don't do the content. I don't interview anybody. Yep. I'm strictly technical help, and also I've just learned over the years producing singers and stuff how to get people to be relaxed, and, create like a loose environment. But what that includes is you show up at the studio. I've got all the sound treatments up, so the environment's real good. I've got my Pro Tools rig all set up. I just have to press record. The microphones are set up across the table. I got the headphones out. They record. Then I cut out whatever needs to be cut out, do the editing, and then I do the post-production. I mentioned the Alec Baldwin. I put that on, then I listen to mine. And if mine doesn't sound as good as that, I keep at it. And so it takes about 2 hours to do a 45-minute podcast if you're really going for like a pro sound.
Yeah.
And you kind of know what you're doing. But once they're coming once, the next time they come in, I'm starting with the same screen, the same plugins, the same everything. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing a podcast with Dave Spears, which is called Phil Estate, which is a real estate focused podcast. And I'm doing one with two kids that grew up in Philly that in kind of disadvantaged neighborhoods that are paralegals, and they want to do a podcast kind of inspiration for people. Kind of in a way like what you're saying, just talking back and forth, and I'm trying to get them to be a little bit more interesting to listen to, because it can be a little bit boring when they're just talking about like a donut or something. And I'm doing a podcast on the Eagles coming up. So just different stuff, but sport. And
It should be both.
so that's, you know, my thing here is I haven't even built a website to put up a podcast. I'm not exactly even positive how that works. So I kind of want to learn that here, because I'm just coming in as, I'm an audio engineer, and I also promote myself as, if you have a recording and it sounds send it to me and I'll make it sound better and send it back to you.
So that actually,
And I tutor people. I've tutored a couple people
on audio
I
engineering.
go to their space, see how they're doing it, tell them how they could improve it, teach them a little about post-production. Takes about 2 hours, 3 hours.
So I'm in the camp of the don't have a podcast, want to start one, haven't committed yet. I kind of want to hear from the folks that haven't, because I'm interested in, I just want to know why why it's in your head, but haven't actually turned it into a reality. And I'm in that bucket. So I'm just curious as to, is it a matter of you're not sure the technicalities of how to build or how to record or how to host or all of that? Or is it, I don't feel like I'm interesting, but I want to have it, or I don't know which format to choose. I hate when people interview people, but interviews do well. Maybe I should just talk into a mic for what, like, what is it that has not gotten you to?
Why don't you have a show yet?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mine is very simple. I just can't think of the name. Because, well, mine would be specifically for profit, to drive traffic to my website. And I do copywriting, but I also do marketing, and I want this angle that will appeal. So I'm playing with different names. But I plan to do, I have a service that we change over called Instant Health Seminar, where you can actually, it's $47 a month, which is on the high side. You can actually call up and you can either use a phone or a mic and record an MP3 right there, and they can add music. I use it for everything. I use it for, you can do a webinar out of it with slides. You can do, I do it for conference calls with clients and record. It's very easy to use. So I probably should get something cheaper, but I'm just too lazy. But and I know people who use that podcast. They create a file. It's very quick. You just use a microphone. You just talk, and then one person doesn't even edit. She says, you know, I want this to be legitimate and real, so I don't even do that. So you can go from one extreme to the other. The one thing I'm trying to figure out is, I did want to edit it. I think I can use ScreenFlow and just edit the audio track, which is pretty easy. So I might do that because I do have background noise. That would be nice. And then, so that's the only thing, is just trying to, but I'm hearing over and over the title, especially the ones that I do, make it commercial on the track on. The title and the audience are very, very important.
Yeah.
So, you know, you don't want to be too narrow. And the other question I have is, what do you do when your cat starts meowing? Right? What I've been doing on the webinar is just ignoring it. I figure if it bothers people, that's their problem.
But do you have your content? You know what it is you want to share. You know.
Yes. Well, once I get the angle of what I'm going to do is spin my. So let's say I decide to do marketing for storytelling. What an option I'm thinking about. And the downside is it's competition. The upside is every time I do something, I get response. So that might be one. I have a ton of stuff on my blog and that I know. For me, it's not going to be a problem. The other thing you can do is get, I always have a list, and every so often people send things in, and you can go on the forum and see what people are talking about. But I am a so I do. So I have tons and tons of content. So my challenge is going to be also narrowing it because I like to go all over the map. Like I like to do one of intuition for marketing, which might not, and I have to figure out if I'm going to do it like, spin it in or just say no. I'll do that one or have to do it. Whatever. So those are challenges. But I haven't really jumped into things that we spend a lot of time bailing out.
Let's keep going around on no, that's fine. I want to get through folks who I want to get to a profile of why folks haven't started, because I feel like in the interest of time, I know we're about halfway through the hour, and I know Sam's taking some notes. And we'll also go back to the recording. I think a bunch of the things that have already come up are giving me ideas for deep dives on specific topics. Everything from like you were saying, Jimmy, about like just how to get set up so when you sit down it's ready to go. Naming not just the podcast itself, but episodes. Like any of those things, we can have a deep dive conversation on because there's more than one way to approach it, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But yeah, let's keep going around for folks that haven't launched one. Is there something in particular in the way that you think is in the way?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, like the question about money and time. You kind of answered that, so I'd like to know like all the invisible work that you don't see when you listen to a podcast, like all the post-production. Another thing is like, do I want to do one by myself or with someone else? Like I know if I do it with someone else, I'll have like buddy system things, so I'll do it and I'll keep to it if I have a buddy who's counting on me. But I don't know who to do it with, so it's like, like I don't even know the subject. Like if I want to do it about technology and startups, which is something that I do every week. So, but anyway, I feel like I would be just like rambling about technology. And another question is about outlines. Like you guys who have podcasts, like you do an outline of the episode every time. Yeah, those are some of the things that I have to think about. And like hearing like an episode of 40 minutes takes like 5 hours. I'm like, does that even make sense for me? Like to spend like 5 hours doing.
Well, but that's everything from soliciting, finding the guests, recording with them, editing, publishing, social media, promotion. So it depends on, do you just want to record and upload it? It'll take you however long it takes you to record. Do you want to package it? I'm also a graphic designer, so I have to package it. I can't, I can't put something out there.
It's your nature.
If a client of mine comes by, I love your podcast, the graphics look horrible, but I'm not going to hire you for that.
Yeah.
It depends on what you want to do.
I have more questions. People who do make it. I said I have more questions. So if it takes around 5 hours, and you guys are reflecting on the effort that goes into it, what is the return on investment for that? What do you get out of it?
So so again, two different shows. For me, both have some commercial ROI. Stacking the Bricks is for an audience to which we sell classes and books and stuff like that. So I don't have a direct correlation, like in same way, like a direct blog post ROI, but that is what I'm looking to. And for me, the ROI, I would say the ROI in both cases that's less quantifiable but leads to a quantifiable ROI is trust. Again, going back to what I was saying before about the sort of intimacy of the podcast format, spending time with people, being able to help them both with their problems, but also understand better where I'm coming from, understand my perspective. That trust makes it easier to build other things on top of. So whether that's leading to other business opportunities down the road or sales, speaking engagements and things like that. Another less tangible ROI for me is same sort of ROI of writing, or it's, you know, getting good at writing means you're getting better at thinking. And it's just another component of that is thinking through stuff that I wouldn't always have a reason to. Similarly, what Adam was saying in Comic Book Junto, it's an opportunity to explore something with someone and then share that with other people. So for me, I'm not, like, we don't run ads in any shows. We don't even really run ads for our own product per se. So it's, for me, it's more about deepening trust and relationships, which I know I can build commercial opportunities on top of those.
You know,
I would agree.
I'd like to say that, you know, from what I've seen, it's really hard to get an advertising sponsor for your podcast unless you have 1 million listeners or something like that. And so
at least tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. It's hard, and it can be easier if you have, you know, you're targeting a specific industry.
Sure.
But these kids that were coming in and they were talking about their podcast, they were asking me about how ads and stuff, and I said, you're thinking about it wrong. You're thinking, get a podcast together and then meet the people that you want to meet, because people will always come into your podcast, and you can make connections and you can increase your business connections and stuff, because people all want to be on guests on podcasts.
Yeah.
But to actually monetize it and getting advertising, it's really tough. So it's really like creatively thinking, how can I make this work for me?
I disagree about the numbers that you just said. My wife has a podcast, and she started it just for fun. It's called the Get Paid Podcast, and it's very niche about like female entrepreneurs that just start their own business. And sometimes it's about connections as well. Like she had a connection in some business who's selling to this sort of entrepreneurs, and she got an advertising contract. So I feel like sometimes it is about connections, like knowing the right people and doing like a very niche. And
like the advantage there's a real specific audience.
Yeah,
right.
It has to be a very specific audience.
Exactly. Like the Phil Estate podcast got some sponsorship because it was just geared towards professionals in the real estate business.
Yeah.
So
I guess
It's so different than blogging. Like everyone thinks that, 10 years ago, oh, I'm going to start blogging, I'm going to make a lot of money, and then people realize, well, there's only a handful of people that actually make money out of blogging. Same thing with podcasts. Everyone's like, I'm going to start a podcast, I'm going to have 10,000 downloads, and I'm like, the chance of, unless you're super niche or like your topic is super entertaining, you're not going to get the 10,000 downloads per episode. And the industry standard is about $18 per 1,000 downloads, and that's that you can guarantee. So if you have 10,000 downloads that you can ask a sponsor, and this is a standard, it's not the rule, but you can ask a sponsor for $180 for that episode. So your numbers have to be huge to be able to monetize, or you have to be super niche. So think about what money you're going to get back. Most likely you're not going to get money back. You're going to get intangible benefits.
Yeah, the ROI needs to be more than just money. Comic Book Junto is intrinsically good for my students, and we're not making money on it. We put money into it. We're fortunate enough that my co-host is the owner of a company that has allowed us to bankroll this endeavor. And we, at the beginning of every show, we advertise the company, Bear Fruit. It's a product of Bear Fruit. We pay ourselves in the sense that we know that a different product and a different venture has allowed us to be able to do this, has allowed us to have the time, and even pay somebody who does some super light editing and the bumpers on our show, which we wouldn't have to do, but it helps us grease the wheel so we keep doing it consistently. It's allowed us to pay someone to make 2 logos for us. We sell t-shirts and merch, but the $4 I get from a t-shirt doesn't mean anything for Comic Book Junto. It just means that we get to spread an idea. But the ROI for the show can't be, we're going to get paid. This is our ticket to internet money. It's more than that. And it's why I say when I do the show, I genuinely believe that the show allows me to connect with a friend, which is a good thing, to talk about things that I like to talk about, and makes me a better human. Like I have practice talking to my buddy who's a black man, who is devoutly religious and married. And the only thing we have in common, apart from we share kidneys now, is we like comic books. So like it can't just be about getting money. And I think one of the biggest obstacles that I had, that I see for everybody else, almost universally, is I put the cart before the horse. And I thought, I can't do a podcast because I don't know how I'm going to package it. I don't know who it's going to send out to. I don't know what it's going to be called. I don't know how I'm going to advertise it. I don't think I can justify all of these things. So I needed to make the podcast integrate into other things, other buckets of my life that needed to be satisfied. Like staying in touch with a friend that I don't talk to often. And if that's the case, I'm like, that was enough. If it's, like Alex, you mentioned, deepening your understanding of community building because you're connecting with other people, and those people are posing questions that you might have never asked yourself, that's a part of the return. And the long game is you do it consistently, you share it with good people tell good people, and then eventually you have dozens, hundreds of episodes, and people think, oh, you're an authority on that because you've been doing it for a long time. And more than anything else, it's really just you've been documenting the thing you've been doing already. Comic Book Junjo is me making a product out of a hobby that cost me a shitload of money. Like every week I pay more than $20 for a stack of comic books. And I've been doing that for a very long time in my life. And only for the past year have I decided I'm going to make it give me something instead of just take. So that is intrinsically the return. And I think that's important to keep in mind because the roadblocks that stopped me from ever having a podcast are totally tied to how much I love Radiolab and how they're so well produced and beautiful, and how I looked at that almost like watching the Olympics and saying, I like weightlifting, but I'll never do that. I would never be in the Olympics. So that was a problem because what inspired me was so incredible. The disparity was all I could focus on.
I went and re-listened to the first episode of the Co-working Weekly Show this morning because I did not remember how it went. And to listen to your point about trying to make it, I think this is true of any creative endeavor, and especially true of podcasting because there's all the things we want it to be, and we try and stack it up against the giant directory of other podcasts that exist instead of like, how do I get my voice onto the internet, which is really what it is at the end of the day. I recorded the first episode on this microphone. It does not sound good, not even a little bit. I did go so far as to record a primary episode, and then I recorded an intro, put a little bit of music behind it, and stitched it together in ScreenFlow. It was super ghetto, but it worked. And I basically committed to myself for a few episodes, more than anything, to see if I liked doing it, because I had never done it before. And it was if I'm enjoying this after 3 or 4 episodes, then I'll plunk down a couple of bucks and get a better microphone. Then I'll plunk down some more time to plan things, organize things. If I'm being completely honest, that effort and investment of time and money has ebbed and flowed over time. But the thing that's been most consistent is if I'm enjoying it. Like that's one of the beauties and I think disadvantages of the microphone. I'm sure this is true of musicians. Like if you're not enjoying it, like you can kind of hear. It's hard to fake it on the microphone, right? So to really be present on the microphone means you've really got to take it. You got to really feel like you're doing something good for yourself. I think that's super important. So a starting point, I think that a lot of people say is like knowing who the audience is. But I would say for me, the starting point was, to be fair, I already had that audience, so maybe don't know who it is that you want to speak to. That is definitely something to think about if that is a goal, is to get this in the hands of strangers. But as a practice, I think there's something really amazing about sitting down on the microphone at all with any sort of habit and just practicing talking about stuff. I think that, and just that it's recorded and can be shared for posterity so you can go back. I learned that I say things and instantly forget them. I listen to myself and I'm like, that was smart. I completely have no idea where that came from. I'm glad I heard that a second time because I can build on that. Or wow, that did not come across the way that it sounded in my head. I need to work on that. So like, I almost treat it like creative writing, where the process is just as valuable as the product. I've had really interesting experiences with guests, and another like topic for future conversations. I was thinking about what you said, Jimmy, about getting people comfortable on the microphone. Like, it doesn't matter how comfortable I am on the microphone. If my guest is not comfortable on the microphone, like, how do you warm people up to that? I think some people are a little more comfortable just now that we do more video chat and things like that. If you frame it as a conversation versus a podcast, the mental gymnastics that people put themselves through when they think about sitting down the microphone, the gravity that comes with being recorded, starts to dissipate. I'm sure that's one of many skills, and I just sort of make it my job to, if I've got somebody else in the show, try and help them sound awesome, whether that is at this point thinking about acoustics and sound quality, but also like ask them a question that I'm genuinely excited to hear their take on, because I think that they can rock that answer, not just like try and throw them your curveballs. I think there's some good interviewing skills in there.
Now, yours is a little different than ours in that yours is very much an extension of what you do. Do you feel that even though you don't make money from it, does it help your reputation? Does it bring business in? So even if it's not money, having a more niche-specific podcast will help with your brand equity.
I think brand equity is a good way to look at it. Like I said, I mean, what you said before about authority, Adam. Authority is not a thing that is bestowed; it's earned, and it's earned by giving. So I see the podcast as a way for me to be generous, because I know that by me being generous, there's opportunities that come down the road. I mean, a woman walk up to me at a bar. This is crazy. A woman walked up to me at a bar in Brussels, and Sam and I were at a conference a few weeks ago, and she was introduced to me by another guy at the conference. She's starting a new co-working space, and she was sort of on a version of the less successful path, put it that way. And this other guy, whose name also happens to be Alex, was like, talk to Alex and like tell him what you're doing and see what he thinks. And so I think she was put on the defense when that conversation started. I think Sam saw me from across the room. Like I was in my convincing face mode.
Yeah, Patterson and I were like, is it time to go?
She was not having it. And somewhere near the end of the conversation, I wish I could remember what I said or how it came up, but I mentioned the podcast. She's like, wait a second. Are you Alex Hillman? Like, I love your show. Like, her demeanor changed. She's like, I've listened to it. All your stuff has been so helpful. And like, the difference between being introduced as someone who could be helpful to her from a relative stranger who thought I would be helpful to her versus someone who she had already listened to, trusted, and learned. There's one thing that I did not expect, but I think is the most valuable thing that comes out of podcasts is when you spend a lot of time listening to somebody, you trust what they have to say. That can be used for evil, I claim using it for good. But yeah, I mean, the reason I'm at this point I'm willing to invest money in it is because I see it as part of a larger platform. Early on, I wanted to do it for as little to no money as possible. I don't think I even uploaded anything to like a hosting platform until I recorded a few episodes.
I happen to think that should be a goal. I think you ought to try what you can and be as scrappy as possible in the beginning before you sink any kind of actual monetary investment into it. Because Alex, you mentioned like you had to do it for yourself a couple of times to find out how you like doing it, if you like doing it.
Also, I listened to it and I'm like, that's garbage. But I also heard from a lot of people like, this is awesome, more of this.
Yeah, I think
okay.
I have the Star Wars theory where George Lucas fucked up so hard when making the original movies that he lost a ton of money and their budget restraints were awful, but it ended up meaning that they became super resourceful and they did what they could with what they had. And I think that's an important ethos because we have equipment at Indy Hall. Chris Morrell bought stuff and it's wonderful and it's set up and you can use it right now. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting over yourself.
Yeah.
And the hardest part that I have had, and the biggest thing that I have learned is my inspiration being something really well produced like This American Life, like 99 PI, like Radiolab, was my fear that I would be on a microphone in public and I would sound like an idiot. And that ended up coalescing into, I've decided that we publish all of our blemishes. And that is part of the philosophy that we have on the way that we speak to one another, which is when we learn publicly. And when we don't get it right, we acknowledge that. And that's a part of the show. Those are in the bones now. Mm-hmm. So even when we screw up the intro that we do every single week, we figure out a way to keep it in the show and entertain someone and be like, wow, completely not on my game right now. Yeah. Apologies. And I think that became important for Octavius and I because both of us wanted to speak, but neither of us wanted to sound dumb. So what we decided is we would learn the lesson from ourselves, which was that's a stupid reason to stop yourself from it. And when it's hard on purpose, and no one benefits from you covering up the difficult part. If the purpose of your show is to help people learn, then you have to walk through that part with them. That's what's worked for us, and I felt like that was a psychological and emotional barrier, and Comic Coach Junjo has helped me, and I still have a hard time with it. But if I thought all I could make was a really well-produced show that was totally tight, and I was the master of the content on the show, I wouldn't make the show. Yeah. And that's the difference. That's the difference between we have 63 episodes as of today versus 0. That's everything.
Yeah. So I'm going to be mindful of time, but I want to hear what you have to say.
One thing is that, so I do not have a show yet. I'm thinking about doing a podcast as much more of a Twitch-like thing, but still a lot of similar issues. So one of the things I'm curious about is people promotion. So it's like, yes, I have a small circle, and I'm sure I'll get some interest there. Outside of word of mouth, is there anything that you do specifically to help the promotion fire grow?
Jag, you share on Reddit when you do your newsletters.
Yeah.
What drove you there?
It was actually more like from so I'm taking like Alex's 30x500, and it's like one of the watering holes, like where you find people talking about the stuff that I write about, which is like front end development. So I just like post it there so that other front end people would run into it. That's basically it. There's like no rhyme or reason except for they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I want to answer your question about the. So you were asking like why people who are here don't have a podcast yet. So the reason why I never started a podcast before is that I didn't think it would, like, I could just blog, you know, like I could just like blog about it. But as time went by, as I blogged more, I share things about my own experiences on my blog. So I was like, it would be really useful if I could share other people's experiences too. So I was like, and maybe a blog is not, it could complement the blog. So like, so I couldn't sleep the other night, and I emailed like a bunch of people like, do you want to be on my non-existent podcast? So I have 2 people now.
Nice.
And I'll be recording next week. I'm excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I do want to interject because we have 5 minutes left. And I just want to make sure that everybody kind of wraps up and moves on with their day. Trying to figure out whether I want to pose this as a question or a statement, but it's the concept is, how can we, being the people here and we being Indy Hall, how can we support all of us in like creating things? And again, I don't know if I don't want to derail it too long because of time. So like it could be a quick, simple statement of like, here's what I think I need. And then we all hear that and we can help each other with it. Or it can be Indy Hall folks saying like, we have a studio here, let's just jump into it sometime. So
my thoughts on where to start with that.
So I have two things. One, I'll quick come back to Mike's question and riff a little bit on what Jag was saying
Sure.
about where to share episodes. Thinking about, in addition to thinking about where communities already are that would potentially like the episodes. So Reddit is a great example because you've got sort of like first post versus comments. It's one thing to post and promote stuff as the first post. It's easy to also be labeled as a spammer, self-promoter, and it's easy to feel like a self-promoter when you're doing that. Instead, what I say my number one opportunity to promote is looking for people who are asking questions or trying to solve problems, or working on things that are related to something I have an episode about, or if I don't have an episode about it, then I'll create one. And then it's more of like, it starts to feel like I created this just for you. Even if I didn't. In some cases I did. But even if I didn't. And what's cool about that is it feels, for them it feels like it was exactly the thing they needed there at that moment. And then there's the back catalog, whether that back catalog is 3 episodes, 30 episodes, or 300 episodes. I think looking at where people who would like it are, instead of promoting it there, looking for opportunities to sort of mention it in conversation more casually. That in itself is a practice, but I find that to be doing that regularly. Like I have a mailing list that I'm super active on for co-working spaces, and I would say 2 to 3 times a week, I can reply, provide value in a comment. By the way, if you're looking for more, here's where I talked more about that. Here's what went more in depth than I could really do in writing. So that's one part of the many-part answer to that. In terms of next steps, yeah, there's a lot of different ways this could go. I think it would be super cool for anyone who wants to get a feel for what it's like to sit down and record a 30-minute conversation about a topic with or without a guest, whatever it is that you're trying to do, to be able to share back to the script, like here's the thing I want, here's the thing I want help with, and then here's a date when I want to do it. And the fact that when we have it here we can do it. Even if you never hit publish on it, I think it's worth getting a feel for what it's like to sit in front of a microphone, either talk at an invisible audience or have a conversation with another person, whatever your vibe, and have something to build from. Because to Adam's point, like it's better to start with something and be like, all right, that was cool. Here's what every version better sort of thing. So I would love for anyone who is interested in doing this, like let's pick your first version. And in the first couple of weeks of the new year, I'm happy to play coach on whatever it is that you need help with, to be comfortable sitting down for a microphone. And other folks that have done it, I'm sure can pitch in as well if you're interested. And there's other people that weren't able to make it here. So yeah.
Last thing, 2 things. One, there is a Slack channel for podcasts that hasn't been very active lately, because when it started, everyone was like, you gotta listen to this, you gotta listen to this. And I think everyone
New cereal is out.
Yeah. It was overwhelming, but that could be a good place for this too, because it relates. A lot of people see it. So hop in that Slack channel, especially if it's something that you can quickly ask and answer. I also mentioned on the thread, I would love some sort of network of indie hall podcasts, and that could be as simple as just adding a page to our site with a link to wherever you host your podcast, because that way we can kind of support and take care of each other. And I know for a lot of people that's 2 steps ahead once you have a podcast. But that way it could be, a cool way to be like, oh, look at this thing, fellow indie hall member. And then if there's a more like fancy official way to do that, someone can tell me, because I have no idea.
I'd like to see a little bit more process. I'd like to find, like, if you could pull back the curtain on what it takes, like what goes into an episode, whether it's sharing the real rough cut versus the polished version, and sort of like, I use this, you name some tools, like lip sync, that sort of thing, like explode the podcast.
Yeah, we can do that.
I think beyond those 3 comments, I mean, there are resources out there. There's a podcast called The Showrunner, which teaches you how to do everything from beginning to end. Here are all the resources, but I think it's very appropriate that this is Indy Hall JFDI, because you will learn a lot more from hitting record, saving it, editing, even posting one, you'll learn so much more just doing that than the months of research. It took me like 6 months of research, and when I started, I knew nothing.
There's a lot of things that you can do that you don't need to do, like recording something and posting it to anywhere. I mean, honestly, just posting a file somewhere so somebody can listen to it is really all you need in order to be like, boom, you've got a podcast. And then you can go, all right, I want to find somewhere to host this and have a feed. Okay. Like, yeah, there's so many things you don't need. They're better to have, but they're not necessary.
You know, I think that judging from this conversation, there's a lot of different facets of it that all could be delved into more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something would be to have this meeting recur and be like, okay, this week we're just talking about, you know, setting up the podcast feed for uploading to iTunes. I mean, that's something I'm interested in, so I throw that out. Another one could be post-production, like what can you do with the audio? And another could be, what do you use to podcast? I think if we just broke it down to being narrow slices, we'd be able to get some more depth.
Cool. I like that a lot. I mean, it's the kind of thing we could also, like, there's a couple people that actually really want to start this at the beginning of the year. We could, like, follow that in the sort of relative order of operations of first and then next and then okay, what do you got to do next? Right, well, that's the next session we're gonna have.
You want to do a podcast about podcasts?
I thought that's where it was going. So I'll jump in and just commit to like doing something because I've been thinking about it forever and like why the hell not? So if anybody wants to like,
so you could be the guinea pig.
Yeah, I'll be a guinea pig. Absolutely, my life is a guinea pig. But yeah, I'm happy to. You know, I got pages of like thoughts and stuff, so I thought it through, but nothing is remotely baked. But like come the beginning of 2017, I'm ready to do something just for the hell of it and see where it goes. So anybody else that wants to join in, you're more than welcome and encouraged.
Cool.
Sweet.
And in the meantime, like before, during, after any formal organized version of us getting together and talking about the process of doing it, I very happily elect myself as somebody who knows at least rudimentary pre-show, production, and post-production. So if you have any questions, whether it's just plugging shit in the conference room to what you do with it after that, take my brain. I'm happy to talk about it.
Cool.
I as well. I have no problem showing some people some post-production tricks. Cool. It's not that hard.
Yeah. I imagine that there's like a handful of things from like microphone positioning to basic setup of whether it's the room or your gear or your software, that like a couple of small things make a big difference. And then there's the next gap of like truly being a professional and knowing how to adjust and compensate. So that would be awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for showing up.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is cool.
I posted the notes in general. I'll put them in the podcast channel. I've linked to what your podcasts are. If you want to do like link an episode to start with, so that folks are not like, oh no, there's 500 episodes.
Yeah, my favorite.
Yeah.
Can you add that link to the group buzz thread too? Because I know there's some people that didn't.
Totally.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
What's your name?
Who's we? Because we didn't. You and somebody else got a dog.
You got a dog?
Yeah.
The house?
Yeah,
The house has a dog?
Molly, short for Molly.
Okay.
All right.
When did you get that?
Why?
When?
Oh,
No, I know why. Great.
Saturday.
Really? Me too. I got a dog last week.
You got Cooper, right?
I got Cooper.
Very cute.
He's awesome.
Very
What kind of dog do you have?
Vanessa, what does your dog look like?
It's a miniature lab.
I'm
Welcome
sorry.
back.
Are you describing the dog,
Actually,
or are you going to show me a picture?
Screen capture as well.
I will show you. This morning, she chewed up a Fleetwood Mac tape, which made me love her.
Yeah, I'm going with that dog. That's hilarious.